I had 44 years at CBS News, 24 years in the anchor chair, and well, just while I would have hoped that it would end it somewhat better, that I moved on.
Dan Rather once made Richard Nixon so nervous that the president asked him if he was running for something. He broke stories that brought down administrations and exposed war crimes the Pentagon wanted buried. For decades, nobody could touch him. Then in 2004, he aired a story about George W. Bush that changed everything. Within weeks, producers were fired, executives resigned, and the man who had survived bullets in Vietnam found himself fighting for his own survival at CBS. What was in those documents? And why did one report destroy a 44-year career in just a few months? The real story is stranger than anyone remembers. Dan Rather grew up in Houston Heights at a time when life felt heavy for almost everyone around him. He was born in 1931, and when his family moved to Houston a few years later, they stepped into a neighborhood where most homes had no indoor plumbing, and people struggled to put together even the simplest meals. His father worked 16-hour days digging ditches for oil pipelines and earned only $1 a day. His mother waited tables and sewed clothes to keep the family going. Their house had 4 walls and 2 bedrooms, and Dan shared a bed with his brother. When he looked across the street, he saw neighbors living under a tin roof on dirt floors, and sometimes he saw families with no place to sleep at all. In 1933, when he was 2, the economy hit Houston Heights even harder. More than a quarter of the local workforce was unemployed, and the relief programs that were supposed to help often never reached the families who needed them most. Even so, his parents taught him that the only way forward was to work and to learn from whatever the world placed in front of him. His father smoked through the evenings while talking about world events, and those nightly conversations stirred a sense of curiosity in Dan that stayed with him. By the time he was 12, Dan was already chasing stories. He picked up bits of gossip from neighbors, listened to police scanners, and treated every sound he heard like the start of a lead. Sometimes he skipped school just to catch something urgent over the scanner. When he gathered enough notes, he sold the information to local reporters for a few coins. And each time he walked away with the feeling that he was getting closer to something bigger. By 1943, he could tell the difference between real emergencies and neighborhood rumors. In 1946, he got his first small scoop about a local burglary after hearing it unfold on the police radio. That moment gave him a tiny glimpse of what a reporter could become. His parents encouraged the hustle, especially his father, who believed that street smarts mattered far more than perfect grades. At John H. Reagan High School, Dan played football with hopes of earning a scholarship. But long nights spent listening to the radio and gathering stories made his grades slip. During the 1948 and 1949 school years, he played hard on the field, though deep down, he sensed that football might not carry him as far as journalism. In 1949, when it became clear that no scholarship was coming, he shifted his energy completely. He wrote for the school newspaper and covered local events with the same drive he had as a boy listening to scanners. He read every newspaper he could get his hands on, sometimes staying up past midnight following national and world stories. Reporters like Edward R. Murrow became his heroes. By 1950, when he graduated, he already had a job with the Associated Press in Huntsville at just 19. His father's nightly world discussions and his mother's love for reading had shaped him into someone who understood news in a way few teenagers did. When he started at Sam Houston State Teachers College in 1950, he carried that same energy with him. He studied journalism but also worked nights at KSM Radio in Huntsville. He wasn't just learning the craft, he was living it. He announced games, called high school football play-by-play, and even wandered into bar fights to grab details for crime stories. His schedule was intense, but he thrived on the pressure. By his senior year, he was doing play-by-play for the University of Houston football team and covering baseball for the Texas League Houston Buffs. He learned to speak smoothly on air even when things went wrong, and that skill followed him into every job afterward. When he graduated in 1953, he already had years of real work behind him. In 1959, he found himself at KTRH Radio in Houston when word came of a plane crash in Iowa. That crash took the lives of Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper. Dan didn't wait for official statements. He hitchhiked 1,000 miles to reach the crash site and arrived before many national reporters. He talked to witnesses, gathered first-hand accounts, and sent back detailed reports while standing among the wreckage. The crash happened at 1 a.m. on February 3, 1959, and the investigators later pointed to poor weather briefings and limited instrument training as the main causes. Dan's reporting stood out because he got there fast and gave listeners a raw sense of what had happened. 2 years later, in September 1961, Hurricane Carla struck Texas while Dan was at KHAU-TV. Instead of staying dry and safe, he reported from a basement studio that was already flooding, the water rising around him as he spoke. He worked long shifts and smoked constantly, yet he always stayed with the story. He used live radar images with a transparent map of Texas over them. It was something no one had done before. Those images convinced more than 350,000 people to evacuate. That evacuation saved thousands of lives because Carla destroyed entire neighborhoods, sweeping away homes until only foundations remained. Dan's work showed how powerful urgent reporting could be. When he joined KTRK-TV Houston in 1959, people quickly noticed how far he was willing to go to find news. He chased ambulances on a motorcycle to reach scenes before anyone else. He ran into protests and came out tear-gassed, still holding his notes. He covered everything from crimes to political speeches. His determination caught the eye of network executives, and by 1961, he was already on the path to national television. Even before that rise, he faced a major life choice. In 1957, he got accepted into law school, but decided journalism mattered more to him. That same year, he married John Goebel, who supported his long days and late nights, helping him type scripts and keeping his early years steady while he built his name. Law school would have offered stability, but he chose the harder road because news pulled him forward. Then came November 22, 1963. Dan was working as CBS's Southern correspondent when President Kennedy was shot in Dallas. He rushed to Parkland Hospital. At around 1 in the afternoon, doctors pronounced Kennedy dead. Dan pushed his way into the morgue to confirm the truth with his own eyes. He touched the president's body to verify his identity. It was a moment that shocked the world once he reported it. The staff was overwhelmed, and taking the body away before a forensic exam stirred legal controversy because Texas law required that exam. Dan was the first reporter to deliver a definite confirmation to the nation. His voice carried the weight of something that would shape history. Within hours, he identified Lee Harvey Oswald as the suspect. He moved between the Texas Theater and police headquarters, gathering details, interviewing witnesses, and working past barriers put up by police and Secret Service agents. His reports gave the country its first clear picture of the unfolding tragedy. CBS promoted him as the man who saw it all because he had been there at every crucial moment. In 1964, he became the White House correspondent and covered President Lyndon Johnson closely. He visited the ranch in Texas, attended briefings, and asked difficult questions about Vietnam. His style was direct and persistent. He wanted clarity and accountability, and sometimes that created tension with the administration. But it also brought the war into American homes and made him a leading voice in news. During this period, he faced danger again. On November 24, 1963, when Jack Ruby shot Oswald, Dan was among the reporters chasing Ruby through the police station. In the chaos, he was punched in the face while trying to get a statement. His suit ended up covered in blood. The image spread across newspapers and magazines, becoming a symbol of how far he would go to follow a story. That same year, he went to Vietnam and recorded the first color television footage ever broadcast from the war. He interviewed soldiers while napalm fell in the distance. He captured the ground-level struggle and the heavy cost of each battle. His reports boosted CBS's ratings by 30% and shifted public opinion because people could finally see the harsh truth of the conflict rather than hear polished summaries. His work changed the standard for war reporting and influenced how journalists would cover future conflicts. Dan Rather stepped into the chaos of Khe Sanh in 1966, when the war was burning at its hottest point, and the Marines around him were holding a base that felt like it was shrinking by the hour. On January 21st, North Vietnamese forces pushed forward with a massive assault that brought 120mm mortars down on the Marines, the heaviest weapons used in that region so far. The siege stretched on for weeks. Shells fell without warning. Snipers waited for movement, and Rather stayed in the middle of all of it, reporting live while the men beside him tried to shield him with their own bodies during broadcasts. The numbers told one story, with more than 2,000 enemy soldiers killed and almost 300 Americans lost. But the look on Rather's face told another. His voice carried the fear and the exhaustion that people at home had never heard so clearly, and millions watched him become one of the most familiar faces of the war. As the years moved forward, he walked from war zones to the halls of power without losing that edge. On October 26, 1973, he faced President Nixon in a press conference that felt like a slow storm gathering after months of Watergate tension building in the air. Nixon's voice was sharp when he asked Rather if he was running for something. Rather did not step back. He answered with a calm question of his own, asking if Nixon was. The exchange hit live television and spread through the country in seconds. Nixon's team hardened their stance against him. Soon he was banned from more than 40 official events. But instead of stopping, he began slipping microphones into the Rose Garden to capture private conversations. Those recordings later helped reveal the pressure, fear, and panic building inside the White House as impeachment started to feel inevitable. His push against power was not new. It had grown out of the years when he stood on the front lines of civil rights battles. In 1965, he was in Selma when tear gas filled the air and peaceful marchers were struck by Alabama troopers. He kept reporting through stinging eyes, showing the brutality the nation needed to see. 3 years later in Chicago, at the Democratic National Convention, fists from angry delegates caught him in the stomach as police clashed with protesters outside. Cameras captured him hitting the floor, while Walter Cronkite's voice cut through the control room, calling the scene the work of thugs.
And there were some people in civilian clothes, not police clothes, who had him by the arms, had his feet virtually off the floor, and they were quickly trying to escort him off the floor. This is a story.
Rather kept talking, even as he pulled himself back up. And that moment stayed in the memory of viewers who were watching their trusted reporters get attacked in real time. His work often led him straight into the darkest stories. When he uncovered the truth about the My Lai massacre, where American soldiers killed hundreds of unarmed Vietnamese civilians on March 16, 1968, he spoke about it with a clarity that shook the Pentagon. Graphic photographs and details went out to the public through his reports. The anger inside the Pentagon grew strong enough that officials began calling him Rather the Rat. But no nickname stopped him. His coverage pushed forward investigations and trials that otherwise might have been buried. His presence in Vietnam stretched far beyond one battlefield. He arrived in Hue City during the Tet Offensive in 1968, though his war coverage had already begun in 1966 when he followed the 101st Airborne through the Boy Loy jungle and Hobo Wood. He spoke of heavy rucksacks, the pressure of ambushes, and the smell of death that clung to the air. On April 12, 1966, one of his reports showed the ruins and the bodies left after fighting, and millions watched him speak with a cigarette hanging from his lips, a small detail that made him feel brutally real to the people watching from their living rooms. That realism followed him into danger. On November 22, 1966, he was on a helicopter over the Mekong Delta when a rocket or anti-aircraft fire hit the aircraft and forced it down into the water. He had to swim through waters known for sharks, while his notes and classified coordinates drifted away and sank out of reach. The fear stayed with him. He later talked about the feeling of being hunted in the water, and that moment became one of the closest brushes with death in his entire career. The stories never stopped, and in 1974 he broke open the truth behind the government's cover-up of Agent Orange. He interviewed veterans whose bodies carried the chemical's legacy in the form of melting skin and unbearable health problems. The Department of Defense had hidden the full truth, and his reporting forced the country to face the consequences of chemical warfare. Lawsuits came. CBS was dragged into court. But his work kept pushing the story forward until the suffering of the veterans could no longer be pushed aside. Those years carved deep lines into his personal life. His chain smoking grew worse and led to emphysema scares. The stress of constant danger followed him home, and in 1972 he divorced John, the strain of war and work finally breaking through. He remarried soon afterward, but the signs of burnout were clear. Even then, he held tightly to his belief that truth had to be told, no matter the cost. In 1975, the country watched him again as the Vietnam Exit Special aired to almost 50 million viewers. It unfolded during the final moments of the war as Saigon fell on April 30th. Rather wept on camera. He called it America's shame and showed the faces of soldiers, refugees, and ordinary Vietnamese people trying to understand the end of an era. His tears turned into a moment viewers still remember, because grief like that could not be staged. It came from someone who had lived the story. His rise through the Watergate years lifted him even higher. On August 5, 1974, he was the one who broke the news that Nixon had released the smoking gun tape, the recording from June 23, 1972, just days after the break-in. He worked with forensic audio experts to confirm it and helped the country hear the moment Nixon ordered the cover-up. He also pushed forward the investigation into the 18-minute gap that Rosemary Woods claimed she erased by accident. His work became part of the final push that led to Nixon's resignation on August 9, 1974. The clash continued. Vice President Spiro Agnew went after him publicly in 1973, calling him a commie stooge. Rather answered not with words but with reporting. He exposed Nixon's secret China diplomacy, revealing that Henry Kissinger had slipped into Beijing in July 1971 to negotiate hidden deals that bypassed Congress and the press. The story aired in 1974 and deepened the belief that the administration had created its own private world of secrets. Even after Nixon was gone, the tension didn't fade. When President Ford pardoned Nixon on September 8, 1974, Rather was first to break the inside story of Ford's reasoning. His reporting sparked ethics debates, congressional hearings, and long arguments about the power of a president to wipe away another president's crimes. His work on 60 Minutes carried the same force. In December 1975, he delivered the Chappaquiddick segment that drew 40 million viewers. It questioned Senator Ted Kennedy's account of the 1969 crash that killed Mary Jo Kopechne. The recreation was dramatic, the questions sharp, and the impact immediate. Viewers were pulled in, and public opinion shifted fast. He entered the 1980s with even more intensity. During Reagan's campaign, and later through the Iran-Contra scandal, he pushed through every barrier. In 1985, he confronted officials about weapons secretly sold to Iran and money funneled to Nicaraguan rebels in violation of the law. The White House eventually had to face the Tower Commission investigation in 1987. Through all of it, Rather stayed firm, pressing, watching, and refusing to let political walls stop the truth from reaching the public. Dan Rather stepped into the anchor chair on March 9, 1981, and the moment he did, something in American living rooms shifted. He was taking over from Walter Cronkite, the trusted voice who had guided the broadcast for 19 years. Yet Rather didn't try to imitate him. He came in with his own way of speaking, a mix of intensity and warmth that made people lean a little closer. Night after night through the mid-1980s, nearly 17 million viewers tuned in, and the CBS Evening News sat at the top. His voice carried urgency. His closing word, courage, often landed after hard stories and left people thinking long after the screen faded. His coverage stretched across 24 years, touching the end of the Cold War, the Gulf War, and the heartbreak of 9/11. Even when cable news began rising and the internet started pulling at attention, his broadcast still held a strong place in American homes, especially through the 80s and early 90s. That reach mattered when tragedy hit on January 28, 1986. The Challenger shuttle exploded in the sky, and Rather stayed on air for 4 hours without leaving his seat. His voice cracked at moments as he shared updates about the 7 crew members, including Krista McAuliffe, the teacher who had inspired millions. People watched the screen in silence while he guided them through the shock with empathy and steadiness. Years later, in 2004, he would again bring the world to a standstill when his program on 60 Minutes W2 aired the Abu Ghraib prison photos. The Pentagon had asked for a delay, worried about the impact on American troops, but Rather believed it was necessary for the world to see. When the broadcast played, the images created a global uproar that forced investigations and set off a wave of questions about war, power, and accountability. Even when he wasn't reporting, he pushed the industry forward. In the 80s, he championed high-definition news long before it was mainstream, arguing that viewers deserved clearer, stronger visuals. His drive spilled into his off-camera life too, which showed in October 1986 when he was attacked on Park Avenue by a man repeating, "What's the frequency, Kenneth?" The beating left him unconscious and created a mystery that lingered for years, even inspiring the rock band REM to write a song around that strange line. While he delivered hard news to the world, awards followed him more quietly. Over the years, he earned 101 Emmys and multiple Peabody Awards. His Gulf War reporting brought him to the front lines of Scud missile hunts and the tense movements of troops, all while he competed with Tom Brokaw and Peter Jennings in a ratings war that became part of television history. Sometimes he slipped on cowboy boots before going on air to show a bit of Texas grit, a subtle reminder of who he was beneath the suit. Away from the cameras, his life carried a softer shape. His son, Dan Rather Jr., worked behind the scenes on the CBS broadcasts, helping in ways only family could. Rather also spent afternoons coaching Little League, blending into the stands so the focus stayed on the kids. He offered advice from the sidelines without letting fame interfere. It made him feel connected to something simple and real, and it showed another part of who he was. That sense of connection followed him into the new century. When 9/11 struck, Rather was already in New York. and instead of staying in a studio, he went straight to ground zero. He broadcast live as the towers burned, collapsed, and left the city covered in ash. He stayed there for weeks. He interviewed firefighters with soot on their faces, families who had lost loved ones, and survivors still shaking. Sometimes his hair and jacket were coated in dust while he spoke. He aired more than 180 hours of coverage. He called the site the epicenter of grief and courage, and viewers felt his exhaustion and commitment through the screen. Only a few years later, in April 2004, he again stood at the center of world attention when he broke the Abu Ghraib torture story on 60 Minutes 2. The images were painful. Prisoners standing on boxes with wires on their hands. Threats of electrocution. Humiliation meant to break them. His team verified everything and released it. The report led to hearings in Congress and changed the way people viewed the war in Iraq. It also earned a Peabody Award for shining a harsh light on the darkest part of conflict. But 2004 carried another storm. On September 8th, Rather aired the Killian Memo story about George W. Bush's alleged preferential treatment in the Texas Air National Guard. The documents were challenged almost immediately. Experts said the typeface matched Microsoft Word, which did not exist in 1973. Rather defended the report at first, but by September 20th, he apologized publicly and said they made a mistake in judgment. The fallout was harsh. Producer Mary Mapes was fired, 3 CBS executives resigned, and the controversy became known as Rathergate. The damage followed him for months and began closing doors inside CBS. Once that trust cracked, access vanished. He was denied embeds in Iraq and Afghanistan. He asked to cover Hurricane Katrina, but was refused. During the 2005-06 season, he aired only 8 segments while others had twice as many. His pieces were placed at low viewership times. He asked for overseas assignments and was consistently turned down. He stayed a full-time correspondent in title only. The message was loud even when the conversations were quiet. His contract expired in 2006, and CBS chose not to renew it. Rather said the decision was political punishment for reporting on Abu Ghraib, and that the network used him as a shield to protect itself. It wasn't the first moment where tensions flared. Years earlier, on September 11, 1987, when Pope John Paul II was visiting the United States, Rather was set to anchor from Miami. Minutes before the 6:30 broadcast, he was told the news would be cut by 15 minutes, so CBS Sports could finish a tennis match. He demanded the full show air, or he would walk. He warned that if the news didn't start at 6:30, he would leave the set and let sports fill the air. When 6:30 arrived and the match was still running, he unclipped his microphone and walked off. The screen went black for 6 long minutes. No anchor, no sound, nothing. Affiliates panicked and scrambled to fill the gap with game shows or standby screens. Tom Bettig, the executive producer, rushed to find him and begged him to come back. At 6:39, he returned and finished the broadcast. The backlash was instant. The head of the affiliate board said, Rather blew it. CBS management tried to calm everyone, reassigned sports executives, and promised changes. The incident became known as the highest-rated nothing in television history, and left a mark that followed him. Finally, in June 2006, after 44 years at CBS and 24 as anchor, Dan Rather stepped away. The network said they had no future role for him. He said they pushed him out. The moment closed one era of television news and opened a quieter chapter of reckoning about how journalism had changed. In September 2007, he pushed back in a different way by filing a $70 million lawsuit against CBS, Viacom, and several top executives. He claimed the network breached his contract and made him a scapegoat to protect its political relationships. He sought $20 million in compensation and $50 million in punitive damages. The legal fight stretched on until 2010, when it was dismissed. Courts said his contract guaranteed payment, not airtime. Even though he lost, the case exposed the tension between journalistic independence and corporate pressure. After CBS, he found a kind of rebirth. In 2006, he joined Mark Cuban's HDNet and launched Dan Rather Reports. Over 7 years, he produced more than 100 documentaries and dug into stories without the limits he once faced. In 2013, he moved into the big interview. Sitting down with major artists and filmmakers, he built News and Guts, pushing into digital storytelling and social justice. And in 2024, he returned to CBS Sunday Morning for the first time in 18 years, a moment that felt like a circle closing. Through all of it, his personal life carried its own weight. He battled emphysema from decades of smoking and had heart surgery in 2015. Even while recovering, he wrote books that challenged the rise of misinformation and called for a return to truth. His memoir laid out the moments that shaped him and the storms he survived. He started the Steady newsletter and used social media to reach new generations who had never seen him on the evening news.